This past weekend, I was back home for my brother's wedding, and every single person that came up and talked to me and knows what I do for a living asked, "So, what do you think of the Shedeur Sanders pick? Is he going to start week one?" Right? And halfway through the weekend, one, I got a little bit tired of talking about Shedeur, but two, kind of started to realize everyone, and I understand why, is asking me about Shedeur Sanders. He was the biggest storyline, arguably, for the entire draft, falling to Cleveland in round five. But I don't think we are talking about the right quarterback or even quarterbacks because all the spotlight, all the attention is on Shedeur Sanders. And then when we take a step away from Shedeur, the next quarterback people talk about is Joe Flacco. I want to talk about the quarterbacks in the middle, Kenny Pickett and Dillon Gabriel, because I think those are two quarterbacks that the public is not giving enough attention to as legitimate possibilities to start earlier than they may expect. So let's start with Kenny Pickett, a quarterback that Cleveland traded for, giving up a fifth-round draft pick and Dorian Thompson-Robinson. And I feel like the Browns internally hold Pickett to a much higher regard than what even I do, or anyone else for that matter, when it comes to talking about who the Browns' week one starting quarterback is going to be. I wouldn't be surprised, back that off a little bit. I would not be that surprised if day one of mandatory minicamp or training camp, Kenny Pickett starting with the first team offense. I say that from two different angles. One, they may feel like Pickett's the best quarterback on this roster. I certainly don't, but Joe Flacco had some great magic with the Browns. That was 2 years ago, and it did not have a graceful ending. So I would not be blown away if the Browns view Pickett as their best starting quarterback on the roster. The other reason why I would not be that surprised is Joe Flacco is 40 years old. They certainly don't believe he's going to be this team's starter for years to come. Whereas Pickett, I think they could think that might be our next Baker Mayfield. Right? That might be our next project quarterback who we salvage and we get back on track to what people expected out of him when he went round one to Pittsburgh. So they may feel like, listen, Flacco doesn't need the first team reps at the beginning of August. He's 40. He's Mike. I'm 40. I'm a man. Like, he's been doing this for a long time. They may decide, let's pull back on Flacco a little bit. If we don't see greatness from Pickett, then we can ramp Flacco up as we get closer to week one. But we saw that it did not take much time for him to start developing chemistry with Njoku and Amari Cooper. So, sure, you might miss out on a little bit of that time with guys like Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman, who either weren't on the roster or didn't have a very big role when Flacco was here last time. Same goes for a few other receivers. But I'm sure that they felt like, hey, given his age, we don't need to see him develop. And what happened last time we learned was he can develop chemistry real fast. So that should not be a major concern for us. But I think the Browns think Kenny Pickett might be their 2025 version of Sam Darnold. Former top 5 pick by the New York Jets, bounces around a little bit, goes to Carolina, goes to San Francisco, then he goes to Minnesota, and we saw how successful he was last year for the Vikings. Baker, not a great final year in Cleveland, a bad year between Carolina and the Panthers, goes to Tampa, competes with Kyle Trask, ultimately wins the job, and the rest is history for him down in Florida. Geno Smith, he was a nobody. He was a backup. And then he gets an opportunity to play a little bit when Russell Wilson got injured. Then they trade Russ, and it's a competition between Geno and Locke, although it was never much of a competition. He made a Pro Bowl his first year as a true starter for Seattle. So I would not be surprised if the Browns look at Kenny Pickett as, that's our Darnold, that's our Geno, that's our Baker. That is the guy that we feel like is underappreciated, written off, but we're not writing him off. And so we're excited to see what he can do for us. That's one quarterback I think that we need to spend a little bit more time just poking around and preparing yourselves for the greater possibility than I want to believe. he could be the week 1 starter, which when they traded for him, he was at the time, the only quarterback on the roster that was healthy. Like, Deshaun Watson is not a part of this picture whatsoever, right? He is so far away from the picture that he's not even like a tiny little paint drop on there. No, he's a nothing burger in this. He's out the entire year recovering from an Achilles injury. So when they acquired Pickett, they didn't have DTR anymore. He went to Philly in that trade. And that was the only quarterback healthy on the roster. But now that they've added 2 rookies and another veteran, we've got a much more clear picture as to what Cleveland's working with going into OTAs, minicamp, and training camp. And while I don't think they traded for Kenny Pickett with the intent of we have found our week 1 starter and everyone else is competing for backups, I think they are getting more and more comfortable with the possibility of there's a chance that Pickett could be our best quarterback, which saying those words out loud makes me nauseous. That would not be good. But that's what I've been preaching since January. It's a bad offseason to need a quarterback. And just because you have the quarterbacks doesn't mean they're all of a sudden way better because you want to just be optimistic about it. If Pickett was on a different team, would you view him as a great quarterback? Probably not. But since he's on the Browns, we're going to try and be optimistic about him and be half glass full. I personally am not going to lose sight of my initial reaction to this, which is, all right, bring in some competition. Bring in a guy that maybe can be salvaged, but I don't think so. And that part hasn't changed for me. We're going to talk about another quarterback that needs a little bit more airtime, but who's going to be the week 1 starter? I'm going to give you my prediction at the end of the video, so stick around for that. But is it Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett, or one of the 2 rookies, Dillon Gabriel or Shedeur Sanders? Let's talk about one of those 2 rookies. And it's not Shedeur Sanders. I know that is the number 1 name right now, but let's talk about the guy that the Browns picked 2 rounds before Shedeur Sanders, who got picked nearly 50 spots ahead of the Colorado quarterback. And that is the Oregon quarterback. Now, some background on him. He's 5'11", 205 pounds, and he's going to turn 25 years old in December. So by most accounts, these are red flags. He's slightly undersized. He's got small hands, and he's kind of older for a rookie. Turning 25, 3/4 of the way through the season. However, he is an extremely accomplished quarterback through the college ranks. Fun fact, 1, he edged out Bo Nix for most starts by a quarterback in FBS history with 63. He started in every single game that he played in, from day 1 at UCF to his last game for the Oregon Ducks. Now, when they made this pick in round 3, I felt like it was a reach. I still do. And it's not a pick that I would have made. But he's here now. So let's put, personal agenda and bias aside, because at the end, if someone likes a pick, it's mostly because they wanted that player before the draft. And if they don't like the pick, that's because they didn't want that player before the draft. And now they want you to feel the same way they felt. So I'll try and get away from that for a second here. And let's just look at Dillon Gabriel in a pro and con, outlook here. Some pros. Showed great decision-making with the ball a lot of times. I felt like he used his legs more than I gave him credit for in the pre-draft process. So that's one pro right there that I'm sure Kevin Stefanski is drawn towards. He's highly experienced as well. He's an accurate pocket passer. Now, a lot of his passes were near the line of scrimmage, which inflated his completion percentage. But I'm looking at this through what would Stefanski like to see in a quarterback right now. And he probably wants to get some stability at that spot. And while you can find quarterbacks who have higher ceilings but lower floors, I think Dillon Gabriel's ceiling and floor is going to be a lot closer to each other, providing a little bit more comfortability with the player. The last pro I've got here is he's an underrated deep ball thrower. He does not have the strongest arm, which is one of my cons. But he does have this nice, touch to the pass, if you will. And I don't know how to describe it other than, if you look at 5'11", you don't really think big, strong quarterback. So you usually discredit his ability to make nice passes down the field. And there are plenty of instances of him probably not having enough zip on the ball to allow the receiver to run under it, whereas the receiver has to slow down a little bit. But he does have a nice deep ball to his game. I'll give him that for sure. Some cons. He's a little on the smaller end. He's 5'11", he's from Hawaii, and he has small hands, and he's playing in Northeast Ohio. May not go well. I don't really know what you can credit this to. He had 6 interceptions last year at Oregon, 4 of which came in goal-to-go situations. So I think one of them was a 100-yard pick six, too. I can't remember. But anyway, that's a problem. That's something that needs to be worked on. And hey, for being the 94th pick, whatever it was in the draft, I'm not expecting any quarterback to be perfect. He was the QB4 taken, right? Cam Ward, Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe, Tyler Shuck. He was QB5 taken. So, yeah, I think there is, some work that has to be done here, but we should believe that the Browns hold Gabriel, to a higher standard and to, a higher just overall belief than Shedeur Sanders, given that they took him in round 3. Did not feel that confidently about Shedeur Sanders in round 3. So I go into OTAs and minicamp, and more importantly, training camp, thinking Joe Flacco, as a veteran, doesn't need to be developed. They can feel like, hey, we can see what we have in Pickett. If it's going well, great. That would be a much better long-term starter for us. If I said that Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett is going to have 4,000 yards, 30 touchdowns, and 10 interceptions this year, we'd all prefer that to be Pickett because that could be Pickett on the Browns for the next decade. Joe Flacco's not playing on the Browns for the next decade. So they're probably going to push Pickett a little bit early in camp, see what they can get out of him. If it's not going super smooth, all right, we'll go back to old reliable, Joe Flacco. And then I have no reason to believe Shedeur's going to be ahead of Gabriel in camp. I think Barry and Stefanski think, hey, this is a quarterback that when you talk about the negatives, the biggest one that keeps coming up is the size, the small hands. And while that's not ideal, there are examples of quarterbacks overcoming those, statures. Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, Drew Brees. It's not a big crowd, but it's not impossible. I think it was Nathan Segura who, just color commentary for the team, said if Dillon Gabriel was 6'3", he would have been QB2 in this draft class. And I don't know if he's exactly wrong for saying that. I am always a little weary when you play a long time in college and your best days, and understandably so, are towards the end. Is that because you're going to be able to play at a high level on Sundays, or because you were 24 and playing against 19, 20-year-olds and you just had way more experience than them? I don't have the answer to that question, but that's a fair question to ask. All right, before we get on out of here, one or two more quick things here. If you want to get a Browns rookie jersey for Shedeur Sanders, Mason Graham, or Quinshon Judkins, use chatsports.com/CLE rookies. If you're even thinking about getting a jersey, use this link because it does support the channel. I put it in the comments and description of today's video. So go to chatsports.com/CLE rookies to get yourself a brand new Cleveland Browns rookie jersey. Okay, are we ready to pick a card? I think that's all we had to go through today. Oh, we have one more thing. Oh, my own prediction. I'm sorry, I blue balled you all from earlier in the video. So, here it is. Ready? I think Joe Flacco is going to be the week 1 starter. I think Flacco is going to prove over the next 2 to 3 months that he is the guy that Kevin Stefanski can trust the most to correctly run his offense for week 1. I do not believe Joe Flacco is going to start 17 games for a few reasons. One, it's the Browns. That can be reason alone to believe they're not going to be that fortunate. 2, he's 40. He's probably going to run into a couple of big hits that maybe knock him out for a little bit. Also, Joe Flacco has not played a full season in a long time. So, all those signs point to probably not going to happen. So, if, but more importantly, when Flacco goes to the bench, whether it's just a benching, because they feel like, hey, we're not gaining a lot right now, and you're not the long-term play, so if we're going to stink, can we at least think while learning if Pickett or Gabriel or Shedeur can be our quarterback? But from week 1, I think it'll be Flacco. All right. Then it gets a little bit complex because if Flacco proves to be the week 1 starter, then they're not cutting him. And I don't think they're going to want to cut Kenny Pickett. I think they're going to want to see Pickett through for the entire season. So if Pickett's on the roster as well, then you have 2 rookies competing for likely just 1 spot. And it's not common for a rookie quarterback to be released that was a 3rd or 5th round pick. And it's very uncommon to have 4 quarterbacks on your 53-man roster. So that's where the Browns are going to have to make a tough decision. But that's not until September. And that decision could easily be made for them if an injury were to pop up or if Flacco isn't playing well in camp and they go, well, there's only like $1.5 million guaranteed to you. We'll proceed with picking the 2 rookies. But getting back to my prediction here, I believe it is Joe Flacco starting week 1. I think Kenny Pickett and Dillon Gabriel are the 2 actual competitors for QB2. I think Cleveland views Pickett as a potential starter for them this year, but they want Pickett to prove that to them in camp, and they're going to give him every opportunity to do so. I don't think he will make that leap that the Browns are hoping he can make. That's just the doubter in me here. And I think Dillon Gabriel is going to edge out Shedeur Sanders when it comes to putting together the depth chart. I don't think Gabriel is necessarily a better quarterback or hands down better than Shedeur, but I think the Browns think he is. They took him 2 rounds earlier. And I don't know if in the next 3 months Shedeur can show enough to undo that thinking they had for months leading up to the draft of Gabriel being ahead of Shedeur in their rankings. Unless he has, by he I mean Shedeur, an unbelievable, undeniable training camp, at which point he will then just be the starter. I don't think there's a training camp where Shedeur can just look a little bit better than Gabriel because Ty's going to go to Gabriel because the Browns like Dillon Gabriel more because they used a 3rd round draft pick on him. You may not have that pre-draft ranking of Gabriel ahead of Shedeur, but you don't matter. Like, not to be mean, but all that matters is what the Browns think. And they think Shedeur is 2 rounds behind Gabriel. So there's my prediction for how this is all going to unfold. What I don't have the clear answer to is, are all 4 going to be on the 53-man roster? Because if the Browns release Shedeur and try and put him on their practice squad, someone's likely going to claim him off the waiver wire. I would think. But then again, no team took him in the draft. So maybe the Browns can sneak him through the waiver wire and put him on the practice squad. But that's a problem for September. We have a long ways to go. Here we go. Let's pick a card to wrap up the show. For my second video today, I got 6 of diamonds earlier. What do you think? I'm going to say 7 of diamonds. Just go up by 1. We ready? No. Jack of diamonds. Jack of diamonds. All right. Thank you guys for tuning in. I'll see everyone next time.